had a big name coming into college, and he got hurt, so his draft stock falls. And these are some of the guys that can really sneak up on you and be good sleeper value for you in your fantasy football leagues.
I agree. Now, I have a question. I seriously, I have serious questions. I hope you can figure this out for me because I can't. So, why do people continue to draft Kevin White but completely ignore someone like Will Fuller? Now, people should love Will Fuller. Will Fuller was drafted in the first round, 21st overall pick. He's pretty much
I love Will Fuller.
Tearing up from Notre Dame, of course, but the dude's been tearing up the preseason. He's in the starting lineup. He scored, I think, a touchdown the last two games. This weekend's game, he caught 3 or 4 targets for 67 yards and a touchdown. Last weekend, he caught 4 of 8 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown. And he keeps blowing up, and he's doing really well. And again, the third preseason game, I understand most of the time they're facing vanilla defenses, but he's playing in the starting lineup. He's doing this against first string, and he's doing really well. Now, even Roto World, I think, is kind of feeding into this because Kevin White's out here, getting 3 yards the entire preseason, and Roto World is still saying to draft him in the 8th round. Will Fuller is he's going out there and scoring every single game, and they're calling him a wide receiver 5. Why are people still on Kevin White, who is just doing nothing, but they just tune out Will Fuller and say it's white noise? That's a legitimate question I have, because I hope do you have an answer, because I don't have it. I don't understand.
I wish I had an answer for you. I mean, if you look at them, if you stood them next to each other, you're gonna say, oh, Kevin White's the better wide receiver prospect just by looking at him. But people take too much, or there's too much weight in the draft combine, in my opinion. You look at all these numbers and things like that, and people bump these guys, so many spots up their draft boards because they're big and they can jump, things like that. But to me, the tape is more telling, and things like that, and their college production. I mean, Will Fuller had at least 2 years, his sophomore and junior year, because he came out early. Over 1,000 yards, over 60 receptions both of those years, and in both years 15 and 14 touchdowns. So in 2014 he had 15 touchdowns. That's more touchdowns than Kevin White had in 2 years of college as well. So in 1 year, in 2014, he had more touchdowns than Kevin White did in 2 years. So I don't know. People are knocking Will Fuller because of his hands. They're worried about his drops. I understand he had a pretty bad drop tonight, but there's a lot of value there. I mean, when is Will Fuller being drafted right now? It's
14th.
Not the 8th round,
according to Fantasy
the 14th round. So that's that's a no-brainer to me. I mean, I'm a Notre Damer. I love that school. I love watching them, and it's hard for me to evaluate those players, without some bias. But he went in the first round, so that still says something too. That there was something that those teams liked, and he's a Blazer, man. He's gonna have some big play weeks. He'll be a nice guy to fill in on some bye weeks. Maybe you get lucky and you stick him in there, and he's got 2 deep balls and 2 touchdowns, and that's 15 points for you.
I think Will Fuller is going to be a guy where it's by the time that other people are on him, it's going to be too late. If you don't get on him now,
right?
One of these days, Roto-World has these things where they don't take certain players seriously. Tajay Sharp was one of those players. All summer, I think they even said it was laughable that he was in the starting lineup. And then all of a sudden, it's like this guy's out here burning first-team defenses. He's the number 1 target for Marcus Mariota. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I guess you should probably draft him. And that's why it's what we talked about before, where the blue text on the Roto-World blurbs is something you might remember that's more subjective. Right.
Yeah, that's all
opinion. So it's always important to evaluate information for yourself, because if you take that blue opinion text as gospel, you're live. Sometimes it's not always going to be right. Again, this is something where I don't get the logic behind it. That's their opinion. But again, that's what you should really pay attention to is the information you're seeing.
Right. I would like to say too that when we're talking about these preseason games, we understand that we're evaluating preseason football, and we've all been itching for football. We've been dreaming about football, all summer, and it's finally here. And you see these guys that have these really good games, and you go out and pick them up off your waiver wire. You bump them up 2 or 3 rounds in your drafts, and that's great. But just remember the defenses that we talked about earlier. They're very vanilla, very basic defenses. You're not seeing a lot of intricacies. So you should be looking more for red flags, players like Kevin White, who can't perform against these most basic defenses that are struggling. That should take more weight necessarily than what Will Fuller is doing. It's great, and you should be keeping note of that, but you should be looking more at Kevin White and saying, why can't you catch a screen pass? Why can't you catch more than 1 pass for 6 yards in a game against these basic defenses?
One more thing I want to note on Kevin White before we move on. So you remember, Kevin White is the number 2 guy in Chicago. So whenever you're drafting Kevin White over Stephon Diggs, there's just that one final tidbit. And I understand that Stephon Diggs has he's in a stigma of Minnesota is in a run first offense. There's not going to be as much volume. But again, I think Stephon Diggs, much like I think Will Fuller, will be the same. It's just going to be one of those players where you miss out on him, and then by the time you're following that blue text, it's going to be too late. I've always said you need to get ahead of Roto World. By the time Roto World posts something saying that someone's a wide receiver 1, if they're worth so much, they set the market value and the deal, and basically the discount time is over. So you need to read the tea leaves and find the breakout information for yourself before it gets out to the whole wide world.
Yeah, you've got to remember that if you're reading on Roto World, then so is everybody else. Stephon Diggs is in you call it a run-first offense, and I would agree with that for another year or two. And Teddy Bridgewater isn't, your big deep ball kind of guy, but Stephon Diggs has a lot of run after the catch ability. He's a really, really good athlete. So he's someone that can still strive even if he doesn't have a cannon of an arm like Aaron Rodgers or Ben Roethlisberger.
Brian, is this the year of the late round tight end?
I think every year is the year of the late round tight end.
It does seem like that. This year, I think we have a couple candidates to be our Gary Barnidge, our Jordan Cameron, something along those lines here. So I've got a couple targets that I have, and I want you to give me your thoughts on them. The first one is Virgil Green. Now, Virgil Green is a guy who he's always been athletic. He's always been someone who, in deeper leagues, has been a guy that I've actually owned him in every Dynasty League I have, and I've dropped him in every Dynasty League, I think, last year. But this year, it seems like he might be the year, perhaps, that he finally comes on. He's been really, he's always been Trevor Simeon's, Simeon?
Simeon?
I think you guys have trouble with it on the Jet Set Dynasty Pod as well. But Trevor S, he's been pretty much his go-to target. Last week he caught four targets for 57 yards, and then this week he caught three targets for 14 yards and a touchdown. He's looking like a guy that might start to put it together this year. Are you buying the Virgil Green hype, Brian?
I mean, for where he's at, I'm definitely buying it. I think I actually picked him up in one of our Dynasty Leagues after you dropped him. He's one of those guys that you see him shine every year, in OTAs before there's pads on. He's a big guy. He's 6'5". He's an athlete. He can run. He can catch. And then for whatever reason, he seems to struggle when you put on the pads and it's go time. But I think this year, with a guy like Trevor S. or Butt Fumble if he's still on the team, there's not going to be as much pushing the ball down the field. You're going to be looking to your tight end for dump offs and for shorter routes. They're going to look to control the ball and let their defense just eat up their offense and then the opponent's offense, and they're going to try and hold on to the ball for as long as they can. So I think that plays to Virgil Green.
Yeah. What's funny is I looked at fantasyfootballcalculator.com for Virgil Green's ADP, and he's literally not listed. So, yeah, he's not there.
Really?
So he's pretty much free. I drafted him in our draft last night. You actually took the guy I've been targeting in drafts, Kobe Fleener. I had him in, I think, every draft, and you took him in the 4th round.
Yeah, I took him a little earlier than a lot of people. Well, you were saying you usually see him go in the fifth or sixth round. I was at a weird spot. I was up. I drafted fourth overall in positioning, so I was on the way back. So I was at 409, and I'm sitting there looking at the guys, and I just really didn't like any of them, any guys that were sitting there. And I'm all about reaching a little bit for a guy that you believe in. And I believe in Coby Fleener this year. I think he can take that Jimmy Graham role.
Yeah, I do agree with that. But after you took him, I decided to just punt the tight end position. And I took Virgil Green. And then another guy I actually took, who's going to be our next candidate, is Jared Cook. Now, Jared Cook is probably someone people have a lot of feelings on. He's another guy. He's always been someone who people have been waiting for it to turn on. It never did, but now he's playing with Aaron Rodgers, and before people may have forgotten, but the tight end position used to be a very productive one in Green Bay. Most recently with Jermichael Finley before he retired, I believe, because of his neck injury. But Jared Cook, there's been camp reports that he's had a rapport with Aaron Rodgers, and then Friday night he had a productive game. He caught 4 or 5 targets for 54 yards in that preseason. Again, that's the regular season dress rehearsal. So he did good there. He's always been a guy. He's fast. He's 6'5", 254 pounds. What do you think, Brian? Are you buying into Jared Cook this year?
Yeah, I am. Richard Rodgers seems just kind of like another guy there. And if they really believed in him, I don't think they would have brought in Jared Cook. He's just somewhat of a big name in terms of a tight end. So I think with a guy like Aaron Rodgers and that offense there that does feature the tight end sometimes, I think he can have some late round value there for sure. And if you miss out on maybe the top 3 or 4, maybe 5 tight ends, there's even an option to stream that position like we talk about streaming a quarterback sometimes. If you play matchups and things like that, it's not a bad way to play it if you can't get one of those players that you really like.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article for SuperFantasyPros.com. I believe I released it maybe last Wednesday or Thursday. I wrote about Travis Kelce, and honestly, I'd rather own a guy like Virgil Green or Jared Cook than someone like Travis Kelce. Basically, my argument for Kelce. Read the whole article for every detail, but the guy doesn't get targets. He's low. Kansas City's a low-volume offense. Really, Jeremy Maclin is the only consistent fantasy producer out of Kansas City for that receiving core. And I owned Travis Kelce in my work fantasy league last year. And essentially, I'll have to get the stats up for you here. But I think pretty much anyone that is drafting Travis Kelce this year may not have owned him last year.
You said that last week or last pod, I think, and that's definitely true. I mean, I'm looking at his week-to-week performance here, and he's just up and down. He's inconsistent. He finishes tight end 8, but once you get past those top 5, top 6 tight ends, it's really a crapshoot. And, I mean, he got 28 points, then he's got 9 points. Then he's got 16 points, then he's got 7 points, then he's got 6. But he's back up to 13. There's just no consistency there. That's somebody that you're going to have to draft in probably, the 4th or 5th round. And, you're not getting consistency. I really look for week-to-week consistency. I like players with high floors. I'll take a high floor and a medium-sized ceiling over a low floor.
Yeah, and actually I have the stats from my article. I got some stats from Pro Football Reference. So they actually use standard scoring for their fantasy archives, but that's okay. Travis Kelce last year actually had 8 weeks where he scored 6 points or less. So that's right. Bad. Like that's pretty much a black hole in your lineup, and I felt that in my team last year when I had him, and then that was the first year I owned Travis Kelce. I didn't own him when he broke out, so I'm like, man, this guy's supposed to be good. He's just really just like I said, tanking my team, and that was the point. That was another realization I had where I'm like, you need to look deeper. You can't just take people's word on things sometimes, because everyone was telling me that Travis Kelce, he's the next big tight end. He's the next Gronk. You need to own him.